I have played and completed The Last of Us Part 2. Sam has watched all the cutscenes. It's time for spoilers. Hello everyone, this is Chris from Antimatter Games, and I'm here with Sam today.
Hi!
And I completed The Last of Us Part 2 over the weekend, and we finally get to take a deep dive into it, not worry about spoiling it for people, and just talk about or at least my general feelings for the games, and then I'm interested to see that Sam, having just watched kind of the movie online, which is like 10 hours, how she feels compared to me. And what differences those make, and how much of a difference actually playing the game is to someone. So basically, the way I set this up is I told Sam to write down a whole bunch of questions and essentially interview me about The Last of Us, because I've spent a little over 30 hours with it, and then we'll just go back and forth from there.
Oh, 30 hours.
30 hours, yep. It's a long game.
A long time. So I wanted to start kind of like right off the bat. I know you didn't play the first one, but you were super excited to play this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured we can open this discussion on what made you want to play The Last of Us 2.
So I played, I didn't even finish the first Last of Us. I learned a lot about the ending because of playing The Last of Us Part 2. And although I love Uncharted and I love Naughty Dog's games in general, for some reason The Last of Us just didn't grab me, even though Joel and Ellie are good characters, or at least they were in the first one. I found the gameplay, it was just kind of dry and lacking, and a lot of the marked ledges and go here and that kind of stuff was a little much for me. It just didn't work for me. So, one second here. There we go. Twitch was being a little weird. So back on that point, it was really when I saw the E3 demo for The Last of Us Part 2 is the first one we saw, and it was just a maybe, 8-minute long clip of Ellie taking down a bunch of scars, who are, they're also called Sephiroths, who are like religious fanatics in the game. And I was taken aback at how... not only how good visually the game looked, but by how smooth the animations looked, and how it looked to me that things were transitioning between cutscenes and action seamlessly, and I didn't know what was a cutscene and what was the actual gameplay, and I was like, wow, this looks next level. The combat looked really brutal and visceral, and I like that kind of game. So really, it wasn't the story at all that drew me to The Last of Us Part 2. It was just wanting to play the game, to experience that kind of gameplay.
Yeah, it's definitely very seamless in between cutscene and gameplay, because I didn't play the game at all, but I've played all the Uncharted games, and I usually go back afterwards and I'll watch the Uncharted movies online, which is just straight cutscenes. This one was about 11 hours, and I would say out of that, maybe half of that was cutscenes, and the other half was just important dialogue and important things that were in the game, and it was very seamless. So a lot of it was gameplay stuff too. But with this game, kind of you mentioned the mechanics. With this being sort of an end of gen game, I would say, with the PS5 and everything coming out soon.
Yeah.
How was it with the actual gameplay in terms of your expectations versus the reality of the game?
So I would say it exceeded my expectations as far as how good the game actually felt to play. One example I'll use, and it kind of touches back on the last question, is that in Uncharted 4, for instance, which is a beautiful game, a lot of the transitions between gameplay and cutscene, story beat moments, will happen when someone's standing on a railing overlooking the ocean, and then you walk up to them because you're supposed to, and then it just kind of melds into the cutscene, right? Whereas in The Last of Us, there is that, but I'm talking more about stuff where you'll be in a combat encounter, against a tough enemy, and they'll grab you and throw you like through a glass case or over a bookshelf, and like to me that stands outside of like your normal gameplay animation, and it's like for a second it played the quick time event. Like for just a fraction of a second, there was a little quick time event that had Ellie flying through the glass that looked extra good. But it was in the action, and as soon as she hits the ground, you're able to pick her right back up and keep going. So things like that were really impressive. Visually, the environments, the rain, the lighting, how your characters look when they're wet, how things look when they're on fire, were the best I've seen this console generation so far, and that's like better than God of War 2018. It's better than Death Stranding, which was a beautiful game, but I think kind of had like a boring color palette, I guess. Whereas even though a lot of parts in The Last of Us 2, you're in like really foresty, rainy Seattle, there's still some crazy variances in lighting depending on the environment that you're in, whether you're in a building or whether it's nighttime, whatever. So that was among the best I've seen this console generation, or I guess you could say it was the best I've seen this console generation.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the ones that stand out from scenes that I watched were kind of near the end when you're going back and you're trying to find Lev's. You're trying to find Lev, and you're with Yara, and the whole town that they're in is on fire. And like ground is wet, and you see the flames reflecting off of any of like the puddles you pass by. It looks just absolutely beautiful. And some of like the best, I guess, fire and water animations I've seen, but all of it looks so real, and you forget at some points that you're not looking at something that's live action. It blends almost seamlessly, and you forget your character is just standing there. You're like, oh shit, I gotta move. This is still a game. I'm not just watching something.
Yeah,
but yeah, beautiful.
The Sephirite village, the part of the game that you're talking about, that was definitely a really good example of it. Just the whole village being on fire at nighttime, and like going in the buildings and the way the shadows played off of the environments. How close you could get to Abby's face and her character during those times, and how like scary real she looked, and like how animated her face was, and like you really see her emotions. Just next level.
Yeah, it's crazy. Speaking of Abby, main protagonists. So anyone who's played the game now, I would say there's two protagonists. At first I had looked at Ellie as a protagonist and Abby is kind of the opposite of that. But by the time you get to the end of the game, it's pretty safe to say they're both protagonists. Let's talk about Ellie first. What was your opinion of Ellie at the start of the game and the end of the game? What did you think?
First of all, I want to say that I think both Ellie and Abby are protagonists and antagonists at different parts of this game. We could dive super deep into that, but I'll stick to your question so I don't go off the rails here. At the beginning of the game, I was really endeared to Ellie. There's some really touching scenes between her and Joel at the beginning of the game. You know, he plays like a Pearl Jam song for her on his acoustic guitar, and it's a tearjerker. And as someone who has like a young daughter, I get that connection and that relationship. You see Jackson, the town that Ellie has been in for the last couple of years. You see that she has relationships with these people. You know, she has a crush on this girl Dina, and there is animosity between her and Joel, and she's going out and she's doing patrols and stuff, and it's just kind of the way she's living. So at the beginning of the game, I had no reason to have any ill will towards Ellie. In fact, I didn't know anything about Abby. I didn't know that was part of the game. Nothing of this game was spoiled for me, which I'm very thankful for, because a lot of people, I think, went into this game knowing a lot of the beats. It was probably ruined for them, because you develop a lot of misconceptions, and you kind of make up your mind before you get to play it, right? And I've seen it a lot. But yeah, at the beginning, I was definitely on Team Ellie. I thought she was a very interesting character.
Okay. and Abby. So about halfway through the game, you're hunting this character Abby up into a certain point because she kills Joel. Anyone who's watching this, sorry, it is a spoiler cast. So she kills Joel, and you're hunting him down for essentially the first half of the game.
Yeah.
And from most of the spoilers and things that people had seen, it seems to be implied that this is a character that you are supposed to hate or dislike, and you're supposed to be on Ellie's side for most of it. After all of the hours you played as Abby, what was your opinion on that character?
So one of the biggest leaks that came out was actually I think it was a screenshot of Abby killing Joel, and then Ellie in the background like screaming like, "No, I'll fucking kill you," or whatever she says. So I think people right off the bat, before they even got to play the game, decided they hated Abby, right? And luckily I didn't know any of that, but their stories are kind of told in reverse. So you start out loving Ellie and loving her character and her relationship with Joel, and then that part breaks, right? And then you move on from there with Ellie as she begins her revenge story, essentially. But you start the game with Abby completing her revenge mission. You know, she's been looking for Joel for years, and she's been training to kill him and find him for years.
Yeah.
And she finally does, and that's essentially where you meet Abby, minus a little bit of gameplay before that. It was funny because when they let you play as Abby in the first place before she kills Joel, in my head I was like, okay, so these are probably the bad guys. It's interesting that Druckmann and Naughty Dog are letting me play as the opposing side for a part of the game, having no idea I would spend like 15 hours with Abby. But looking back now, it's so interesting. It's just the amount of things I didn't know were going to happen with Abby, and like how much we would go through together. So like I said, you start with Abby after she's killed Joel, and you see someone who's been hell-bent on revenge and filled with hate for the right reason. Joel killed her father when she was young, like Ellie in the first game. You see her slowly start to gain her humanity. You know, and she makes friends, and she finds empathy, and she's widely regarded as a shitty person, and like people tell it straight to her face. She gets put down by her friends and people she thought was her friends. She's the top Scar killer, like she's a cold-blooded killer. But she meets Lev and Yara, and she gains that human side of her back. So it's as much a story of Ellie's like descent into just like pure hate as it is Abby's redemption story.
Yeah, watching it was very interesting. Because I didn't know much from the first one. I had read kind of like a little synopsis of what do I need to know from the first game going into the second one. And you kind of watch, like, you start off with these nice, exactly like you said, endearing feelings towards Ellie. And I kept finding as her story went on, I liked her less and less. Like, it seemed like there were so many opportunities where she could have made a different decision, or a decision that would kind of like grow her character in another direction, and she just like kept passing them by. Whereas Abby's in the total opposite direction. You start off with this character thinking, I'm not gonna like her, like she killed Joel, she's done all this awful stuff, and she just grows on you with every hour you spend. And I mean, I only spent about 5 hours with her watching cutscenes. I can't imagine what like 15 hours would have been like. But you see these two characters that are running almost parallel to each other, and it's just interesting to see where one of them will grow and one of them won't. And I wonder what it is. I don't really know, because I mean, they're not real people, I can't ask them, but it's just an interesting to see the two characters go off on such different paths. Like Abby by the end is just tired and is like, just like, let's just end this. Enough people are dead. We've all been through enough. And I'd like to see Ellie get to that point, but she doesn't.
Well, she does, but It takes a long time. One thing I really like about the game is the length. And while I was playing it, I wanted it to be done, or like I thought it was going to be done sooner than it was done. But in hindsight, looking back now, and it's really great. I really think before you can form an opinion on this game, you have to finish it all the way through. I think it's just impossible watching cutscenes or reading internet comments or articles or whatever. Like you really have to experience it to get it. But the length is really key, I find, because with Ellie, you know, for me at least, after Joel gets killed, I was very much with Ellie. I was like, let's fucking get these people. I can't wait to, you know, grab them around the neck and stab them in the throat and do all these like crazy kill animations and stuff. And each one of them she caught up with, I was like, yeah, like serves you right. You killed Joel, like fuck you.
Yeah.
And that felt good. But then you're with Ellie long enough to see her start lying to people that she cares about her motivations, right? Like she finds out Dina's pregnant, but she keeps going after Abby. She leaves Dina in the theater, who's taken a beating, who's sick, who's like in that point of her pregnancy where she's, you know, she's really sick. But Ellie keeps going after Abby at that point. She just leaves her in the theater. And then Jesse, Dina's ex-boyfriend, comes back into the campaign at one point. So they go out, or at least from that point from that point Ellie is operating under the guise of she's looking for Joel's brother, Tommy, who's gone after these people as well, right? And they're like a day behind him or something. And Jesse asked her, like, once we find Tommy, like, we're going to take Dina back, right? And Ellie kind of stutters for the first time, or, you know, and lets it slip that, like, no, I'm getting Abby. Like, if you find Tommy, you can bring him back. And that was the first of many bad decisions I think she made. Increasingly bad decisions that kind of spiraled her out of control on this like kamikaze course with Abby. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And like speaking of side characters, there's quite a few of them in the game. And something being so story heavy, it's interesting to see which ones played a bigger role. So out of everyone, we kind of had Dina, we have Jesse, Tommy, and Joel. They're kind of the main ones in Ellie's faction.
Yeah.
On Abby's side, we've got, I would say, Owen is probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
And Isaac is the guy that runs the camp.
Isaac runs the WLF, the Wolves.
Yeah.
You have Mel, who is Owen's girlfriend, essentially. He's gotten her pregnant, so she's around, even though he's really in love with Abby. And she's still in love with him, as we find out. And then some of the lesser players, like Manuel, I think. And then the other people in Abby's party get dealt with pretty quickly.
Yeah. Other than that, I'd say there's pretty much only like Yara and Lev are the other main characters.
I would say they're like the third group.
Yeah. So out of those guys, were there any kind of side characters who you were really, really interested in or really impressed by, or who felt that they were really like a major part of the story and were invested in them as well?
Outside of like Joel, Tommy, and Dina, I think Lev and Yara were the most important. Not just because their story was interesting, in that Lev was trans and he kind of came out to his mother. At first, he shaves his head in rebellion, essentially, because they're going to marry him off to one of the elders in the Sephirotes. So he shaves his head. That's forbidden. They're going to kill him. So he flees with Yara, his sister. He ends up, that's why you go back to the Sephirite village, because he's been brainwashed enough that he goes back because he wants to confront his mother about it, because obviously she's against it. And that doesn't end well. He ends up killing his mother in self-defense because she attacks him. She just can't handle the fact that he's trans. So those two were the most interesting, and I also think Lev and Yara are the biggest reason for Abby's redemption. through them, she really finds that she can care for people again, and that she'll go out of her way. She goes out of her way quite a bit to help Lev and Yara.
Yeah, they were an interesting kind of plot point. I would almost love to see more of their story in like a separate game or a DLC. I don't want to say, because I don't want to say it seemed like it didn't need to be there. Like, it definitely needed to be there to help push Abby's story along. But I know there was a lot of controversy just from people online that it was thrown in just for like shock value.
That Lev was trans?
Yeah.
So originally the rumor was there was a trans person in the game, and everyone assumed that it was Abby because she's built, right? Turns out she's just a strong girl, and those are real people. But yeah, so I will really recommend, just to plug someone else, to go watch the Kind of Funny spoiler cast that Greg does with Neil Druckmann. He does with the voice actor of Ellie and the voice actor of Joel. And they really break this stuff down like crazy and get you inside the minds of these characters and their processes. And one thing they talked about is how the decision came about to make Lev trans, and that there was someone who had transitioned in Neil Druckmann's family recently, and he has a handful of trans people on his team, so he worked with them a lot and seeked outside opinions as to how to really handle the situation properly. So what he said is that it was important to him to have that kind of representation in the game.
I like that. Yeah, because just from watching it, to me, it didn't feel extra or didn't feel out of place. Like, it definitely felt like a situation that fit in with the story. Yeah. I had originally gone into this thinking it was more of a like zombie, I don't know, zombies, but like they're infected, whatever it is. But it ended up being more of a personal story. It's how do humans react in these situations. So something like this would definitely come up in kind of a post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, in a religious extremist camp.
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, well, we have it now, and we don't even have zombies yet. So I mean,
exactly.
it would definitely come up. So I was happy to see that. Kind of like a side question along those lines. With things like video games and entertainment that touch on a lot of these topics, do you feel like it's a kind of social responsibility for game developers and writers to address these topics, or do you think it's something that we should kind of keep separate, like just like games be games?
No, I don't agree with the whole like keep politics out of game stuff. Video games are politics, you know? They're driven by human interaction and human emotion, and that's where we find those kinds of things. Like, the world isn't black and white. It isn't simple. And to keep making video games with just your white male protagonists and not represent a large portion of the population is just kind of silly to me. Especially when you're dealing with that large of a group of people. Like, you have the WLF, who are thousands of people. You have the Sephiroths, who are thousands of people. The Fireflies, you have all the people in Jackson. Like, there's a large portion of the population that's shown there. So, like, yeah, there's gonna be gay characters. There's gonna be trans characters. There's going to be characters of different ethnicities. And I don't know about responsible, but I think it's just inaccurate to not have that kind of representation in a game that is a human story. You know, if we're talking about Mega Man or like fucking Street Fighter, then maybe no. But this is a very realistic parallel story to our reality as far as human interactions go and how people deal with things under pressure. So yeah, I think those are very necessary to have in video games.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Seeing all those different representations, and it was really interesting to see. It seems like things are going in that direction. When we watched the Sony event a month or so back, it was kind of surprising to see how many of the games have like female protagonists, which almost seemed skewed in too far of a direction. I was like, every single game was a female protagonist or a cat. So it was like one of.
Okay.
So it is interesting to see that shift,
Yeah.
and I'm glad it is. I'm glad it is happening.
Yeah, before we move on from that, I'll say that I think video games are doing a much better job with representing at least female protagonists than, say, Hollywood is. You know, like if you look at movies like The Avengers, if we're talking about like extraordinary people, if you look at movies like, you know, the Marvel movies and DC, and you have these female heroes, they're generally all the same. Whether they're a different ethnicity or not, or they're a different orientation, they have their big hair, they have their tight costumes, they do the same type of fighting moves, you know what I mean? Like, but I love that in Ellie and Abby, not only are those two characters very different physically, but they're very grounded. You know, these are two just normal women who can fight, who can handle themselves. Yeah, I like that a lot about the game.
It was cool just to touch on their different styles. Watching little scenes of Ellie kind of like creeping around and being a little bit on the sneakier side, like taking people out with bows. And then I don't remember if I watched it in the cutscene or if you were playing it.
It was definitely in the Sephiroth village that I had a very violent encounter in the village there. Yeah.
There is some real violence, and I remember watching it and I'd be sitting there being like, oh my god, that hurt me. And I remember at one point, like, it was somebody was playing as Abby and like happened to grab someone and just like slammed their head into like a window ledge.
Yeah.
And like I felt it, and it was like that was very intense.
It's fucking great, yeah. I love
it was so good.
I love that difference between the two characters, being able to play as Ellie and being very stealthy and sneaky when she, you know, when you go for that triangle grab, the stealth grab, she'll put their hand around their neck, but then she'll immediately put the ice pick or the blade in their neck so they'll bleed out and die. But with Abby, you can do that. You can make shivs and you can stab them really quick and they'll be dealt with, or you can break their neck or choke them out with your muscles, which is awesome. And then Abby also has a skill set that Ellie doesn't, which is called momentum, and I didn't even really know about this until I finished the game. But if you get into a melee confrontation with somebody, and I don't mean with a weapon, I mean with your fists, and you give a killing blow, you'll have momentum towards the next one. You'll deal more damage, and you kind of get this like tunnel vision visual. And that's what happened during the part that you watched, where I smashed that person's head into the wall, and then I just beelined it for the next person and beat the shit out of them, and like broke their neck over the windowsill. And like, meanwhile, while all of this is happening, you're right up close to Abby and the people, and it looks amazing. My goodness.
Yeah, definitely a very satisfying, violent game. Which can be, or you can sneak by, which kind of leads me to my next question. We had mentioned on kind of a previous discussion about this before you were finished. There's a lot of instances in the game where a character may make a decision that you may agree or not agree with, and with it not being like an RPG or something where you can choose different options, you're forced to sit there and go along with what this character is going with.
Yeah.
Were there any scenes or any moments in particular that really affected you, that were just like, this is something that I'm like really uncomfortable with, and that sat with you for a while? Or did it all feel pretty in line?
No, there were a lot of awful feeling moments that I didn't want to happen. And again, this speaks to finishing the game, the importance of seeing that game all the way through. Is that like halfway through, I was thinking, I'd love to make a choice here. I'd love to have the freedom to say yes or no as Ellie or Abby, with whatever decision they were going to make that was very impactful. Mm-hmm. But having finished it now, I really understand that the world of The Last of Us 2 is just so violent and brutal and unforgiving, and these people are fighting for their lives, and they're so full of hate and rage at different points in the story, and you as the player kind of have to sit there and deal with it. So when you watch Ellie make horrible decisions, which I was like yelling at the TV out loud, like don't, no, like stay here, don't leave, or like just for fuck's sakes leave her alone or whatever. You have to sit there and stomach it, and like, man, I had said this to Matt the other day when we were talking about it over Messenger. Those moments, they put a bad taste in your mouth, right? Like at moments in the game, I fucking hated Ellie. I thought like this. What is she doing? Perfect example is at one point in the game near the end, you end up on a farm with Dina, and she's had her baby, and it looks like a happily ever after ending, right? She's on the farm, they have everything they need, it's all fenced in, they love each other, they have this child now, everything looks great. But Ellie is, at no fault of her own, just has severe PTSD. And she's a broken person, and the point was brought out to me after I finished the game that she's essentially an addict. She's addicted to finding Abby. Like it drives her. And there's a scene she's in the barn with the baby, and she just has like a violent flashback where she just loses herself, and is kind of woken up by Dina as she's seeing Joel being like brutally murdered again in her mind's eye. And this happens to PTSD. People with PTSD in real life. So she essentially, after Tommy comes and kind of guilt trips her, who's kind of crippled at this point, saying, you said you'd finish it. Like, you promised me you would kill the woman who killed my brother. Ellie gets up in the middle of the night and she decides to leave Dina and the baby and keep going after Abby. After Abby spared her life multiple times. Abby's given Ellie so many chances at this point, and she goes anyway. And I was furious. I thought it was a horrible fucking decision. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the game, when you play as Ellie again finally, and you're looking for Abby, you've left Dina, you're in California, I believe. You kill all these people again to get to her. All of these people are super shitty, so that felt great. They have like slaves and stuff.
Yeah, they were weird.
Yeah, and you find Abby and Lev, who have tried to escape, and they're essentially being strung up on the beach on poles like they're crucified, and they're both half dead. Mm-hmm. So Ellie cuts them down, and Abby doesn't want to fight. She's like, there's boats this way, like, let's get out of here. And she can barely talk because her like mouth is so dry. And Ellie doesn't let her go. There's two boats. Ellie could have hopped in the second boat and just been on her way, but instead she tells Abby like she can't leave. And Abby's mm-hmm. like fuck off. I'm getting out of here. I'm not going to fight you. And in another move that I was like, oh, like, you gross person, she goes and holds a knife to Lev's throat, who's unconscious essentially, saying like, fuck you, fight me, or I'm going to kill Lev. Like, I'll murder her unless you fight me to the death. And that's what ends up happening. And that's a horrible decision on Ellie's part. And I felt so bad for Abby because she's already been through so much. But so on the flip side of the coin, I can't think of another video game that's made me feel hate like that. That's made me feel regret. That's made me wrestle with those kind of emotions. That's made me tear up. That's made me feel this whole whirlwind of emotions. This game is unique for that, and I'm really glad I had to sit and stomach these decisions of these broken people, because it made the experience that much more real. Yeah.
Watching all the cutscenes, knowing it's 30 hours, it is a big commitment. It did make me want to go back and actually play it at some point, even though I know everything that's going to happen. But like, all of these scenes that I was watching, they reminded me so much of the feelings I had watching something like Battlestar Galactica. Like, it's good. It's one of the best stories I've ever watched. Is it enjoyable? No. Like, you're sitting there and you go to put on the next episode and you're like, I don't know if I can emotionally sit through another hour of this right now. You're like, I don't think I can do it, because something bad's going to happen. People are going to make horrible decisions. You're going to have to watch things that you don't want to watch. But it's just, that is human nature. And you get so many video games and stories right now. It's a difference between like Next Generation and Battlestar. Next
Yeah.
Generation, nothing truly bad happens, and you know at the end everyone's going to be okay. Everything's going to be like nice and glossy.
Yeah.
Whereas with Battlestar, it's not, and that's the feeling I got with The Last of Us, or The Last of Us 2, is that I think people already had their expectations that they were gonna go in and be like, I'm gonna enjoy this game, and it's like you're not going to enjoy it in the sense that you think you're going to. It's going to be a very intense story. It's going to be very, very heavy, and it's going to be really, really good. But it's not going to be fun
Yeah.
at any point in time.
The game, I very much enjoyed the gameplay for every second of the game. The story is just not a nice story.
Yeah.
It's not a feel-good story, but it's a rich story, and it really makes you feel things as you play it. Which, like I said, I can't think of another video game that's maybe had those kind of feelings. Just that array of feelings. Like I've played other games, like I don't know, Uncharted 4, that made me feel really good and like happy, and it's an adventure. But not games that have made me feel hateful and like shitty and second guess protagonists and things like that. Like that's a really neat experience.
Especially when you have protagonists who are making decisions that don't sit well with you. Like when you look at the end, when you kind of compare the Ellie and Dina situation with the, I guess Abby and Lev. Not that it's like a romantic relationship or anything like that, but you find both Ellie and Abby are broken in their own ways and have found somebody in their lives that could help turn that around, and that they could kind of devote their life or redirect their life into looking after. Yeah. And it was just very interesting to see how Abby just kind of took that on, and it was like, you know what, I've had a lot of shitty stuff happen up into this point, but Lev needs me, and I'm going to be a better person for Lev. And you have Ellie in the exact same situation, who chooses to not do that, or who is unable because of her past and because of this addiction or this obsessive need to find Abby, who has that person and literally looks Dina in the face and is like, yeah, I'm gonna go. I have to go do this.
I would say the parallel there is more Dina and Owen, because in the process of Ellie's revenge and her addiction to getting Abby, she loses everything, right? She comes back to the farm at the end of the game after that fight with Abby, and they're gone. The house is empty. She's lost everything she's ever cared for. Joel is dead. Abby is gone. The kid is gone. She's fully by herself. She's fully alone. And she deserves it at that point. And then at the same time, you do lots of like dream sequence and like in the past missions as Abby, where it builds the relationship between her and Owen, and you see that they're kind of like soulmates and they love each other. But in the process of Abby's mission to get Joel, she's so filled with hate that she kind of forgets about Owen and leaves it behind, and then Owen ends up dead at the end of the story. So they both lose the two people they cared about the most to be able to see through what they needed to. Just at different points. That's all.
It's very heavy. Just to kind of like open up the floor for discussion. Were there any kind of like comments or points that you wanted to touch on that we haven't covered yet? Like things you wanted to go over?
I wanted to talk a little bit about what the game was about, or what it meant to me. Briefly, because you see a lot of people boiling it down to like, it's bad to be violent, or people are shitty, or there's no good or bad, there's just gray. And like those are all relevant and they speak to the story. But for me, the story was really about, and on both sides, how much hate and revenge can take from you. How much being like that can break a person and just essentially strip you of everything good in your life. And it just shows you the consequences of following that path. The game is about what addicts go through and how they have to hit rock bottom to really turn themselves around, and how no one else can convince them that it's time to do that until it actually happens to them. And you see that with Ellie happen over and over again before she finally does really hit rock bottom. And everything's gone because of it. It's very much a human story. It shows that people, even in the darkest of situations, can find empathy, can love somebody. And I think it's a story about love and how good love can feel, and how bad it can turn things around for people. How loving someone, whether they do something to you or something is done to them, can turn to hate so quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it also draws a lot of parallels between our current reality, you know?
Yeah.
I saw a comment somewhere. I might have heard it in a podcast because I've been listening to a lot of them about The Last of Us lately. Someone had said, like, but you think if something happened like that, people would band together. And it's like, are you fucking crazy? Like, all of these warring factions, that's so spot on to what would happen. We're very tribal and violent as a species, and you know that if society broke down, we'd break down into tribes. You'd have warlords, you'd have fanatical groups, and that's just the way it would be, and I feel like that's so accurate to the human condition. So that's what the story is really about to me.
Yeah. Do you think that's that was the intention of the writers and the developers, or do you think it was more a kind of leave it open to your own interpretation?
No, I think that was the intention. And after listening to Druckmann talk about what it meant to him, I think that's what he wanted. He didn't want it to be like a find your own adventure type game. No, it was that vision, and you're going to sit through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. There were not a lot of scenes that were open to interpretation. It was very straightforward. And I think games like this, where you don't have choices, where you don't have options, and you have to sit through the story, it's very intentional with what they're trying to tell you. Because if it were open to your own interpretation, they would let you do other things. But they're like, no, we're going to tell you the story. You're going to sit through it. You're going to experience, and you're going to get the message. And I think they did a wonderful job with that. Whether it's your cup of tea or whether you enjoyed it or not, I think they did an absolutely wonderful job telling the story that they wanted to tell.
Yeah, they really hit it home for me. I feel like anyone who plays it, in the regard of, they really put you in the shoes of Ellie and Abby as far as that kind of cycle of violence that they're going through. And I feel like that was so masterfully done, thinking back on it, because you're with Ellie 100%. You see Joel get murdered. Then you're with Ellie to get these people and to get revenge. And you go through that room of people that are around when Joel gets killed, one by one, and you kill them all. And like a good example is you catch up with Nora, who's this girl. You catch up with her in a hospital, and as Ellie, you chase her through this whole hospital. It's this long chase. It's drawn out. But as the player at that point, you want to get her, not only because she was part of killing Joel, but because she's being annoying and dragging you through the entire hospital and knocking shit over and like getting people to shoot at you and trying to pull infected towards you. And you're like, just get back here so I can kill you already. And you catch up with her, and they, not that this is a choice, but you at least get a prompt in this point. You're trying to get information out of her at this point as to where Joel is. So Ellie essentially is going to beat it out of her. She's going to torture her to get the information. So you have to hit square a couple times, and every time you do, Ellie cracks her in the face with a lead pipe, and you're sprayed with blood and everything. But for me at the time, it felt good, because I was like, good, you deserve this. Tell me where fucking Abby is, because I'm going to get her. And then on the flip side, when you play as Abby, you start in the WLF camp, which is this massive camp in a stadium, and all the questions of how Abby got so jacked are out the window when you see their like fully functioning giant gym that they had that football players used to
It
probably
makes
train.
sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense when you see it.
Anyway, and all of these people that you just finished running through as Ellie and like brutally murdering, you meet one by one. These are Abby's friends. They're real people. They have faces. They have personalities. They are nice. They help Abby. They care about her. They care about their friends. They have friends and family. Like, you see lots of kids running around in this place, and you just get done murdering these people, and it starts to sink in, like, oh shit, like I'm about to come up to this person, and they're gonna be dead, and Abby's gonna find them dead. Like when she finds Owen and Mel, who Ellie kills, more in self-defense at that point because they kind of rush Ellie. At that point, you're really endeared to Abby, and you really, I was really invested in Abby and Owen and like their relationship, and I'm like, oh man, and it caught me off guard because I wasn't thinking about it. But you get back to the aquarium after the Sephiroth village, and you open the door, and I was so caught up by the action. That's why the pacing is so great in this game. I was fully absorbed in that fight in the Sephiroth village to escape with Abby and Lev. And you open the door to the aquarium finally, and the dog is dead on the floor. And I was like, oh, fuck. They're all dead. Like, I'm going to find Owen and Mel on the ground, and they're going to be dead. And, like, as Abby, I love Owen. And Mel is pregnant, and they're both dead. Ellie killed them both. So they really... They show you the consequences as a person of acting like that. Of being revenge driven, of being irrational, of lying to people. Amazing.
Yeah. It's such a matter of like a forced perspective, because you never get that in video games. Most of the time, you're just some random protagonist, and by the time you've finished this game, you've killed God knows how many people. They're always, troops or hired guns or something, but you're murdering everybody.
Yeah.
And this game spends the first half of it getting you to do that. You do your traditional, you go through, you're killing people, you're just stabbing, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
And then it forces you to flip and see it from the other side. And that's when it really gives you that, like, oh shit moment of like, this person, like, I killed this person and they were only doing the exact same thing that I'm trying to do.
Yeah. And
it really gets rid of that good and bad. You're like, no one's a good guy, no one's a bad guy in this game. Everyone's just people.
Yeah. That's what's really unique about this game is that, like, take God of War, for instance. There were some really emotionally impactful scenes in God of War, but to me as the player, I was watching Kratos have those emotions. I was taken back that I could see this video game character feel love or anxiety or whatever he was feeling, like when Atreus was sick or, things like that, and feeling his shame and at his past and stuff. But again, that was me looking from the outside, seeing what Kratos was feeling, and then connecting with him. But in The Last of Us, you have to walk in these people's footsteps, and then they make you, they kind of shove your face into it after you're done. And they're like, look what you fucking did. And you're like, oh, ooh, uh-oh. Yeah, I did that. That felt like shit.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can't think of a single other game that's ever made me feel like that.
Yeah. No, neither can I. Watching those scenes, it was like when I was trying, like I was racking my brain trying to think of when do you ever flip and like you're stuck in the shoes of a kid whose dad is a soldier and got killed by the main character.
Yeah.
And then have to deal with that. And never. You never see that.
It's only because this is a video game that you can have that. Movies aren't like that. Shows aren't like that. Most other video games aren't like that. It's only because you have to play as these characters for hours and hours and hours. That's why I think you really should play the game, because when you get to pivotal moments, you've had to earn them. You've had to fight your way through hundreds of people as Abby. You've had to slowly encounter your friends that are dead as Abby. You've had to, frantically search for Abby as Ellie in this huge town of Seattle. You're all over the place trying to find her. in this destroyed town, and you have to sit there and go through all these environments yourself. You can't just skip to the cutscenes and see what the outcome is. Like, you earned them. You really earned them. And that's a reason why some of the flashbacks are so good as well, because you'll have a very intense action sequence that can last like maybe an hour. There was one part where I was Ellie fighting the WLF, and it was the busiest action encounter I'd had so far in the game. I must have fought like at least 50 WLF members through this big overgrown suburban town, essentially. Super high heart rate, super intense, just killing like a whole bunch of people. And then you're done, you get to the theater, you help Dina relax, and Ellie falls asleep, and you have this beautiful cutscene, not cutscene, but it's playable, between Joel and Ellie a couple years in the past, and it's Ellie's birthday, and Joel surprises her by taking her to the dinosaur museum. And, or no, it's a science and tech museum, or it might be both, I can't remember. Anyway, and you find out Joel's entire knowledge of dinosaurs comes from Jurassic Park, and he's set up so that Ellie, who loves space, can sit in the top of like the Soyuz capsule, and he gives her a little tape with the ignition sequence on it. He gives her a space helmet she can wear, and it's like such a tearjerker. And you're reminded of why she's on that mission, and like your love for Joel is renewed, and your hate for these people that you're following is renewed. But you get to relax before you go to the next kind of shitty, intense, grimy, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, I forgot about that, and that would be so much more impactful actually playing it. There's a couple times where they do those flashbacks with Joel, and it's usually after it's been a while, and you're kind of starting to not forget about it, but the initial shock kind of starts to wear off. And then they'll have another one of those just very endearing scenes. Like I remember there was one where they're like traveling. I don't remember where they're going, but at one point like he pushes her in the river, and then like shortly after like she pushes him back in, and it's just such a really, really cute scene. And you love these characters, and it's such a jarring juxtaposition between how you can have these like small life moments in the middle of something that can be so awful. And it reminded me of that scene in, oh god, I don't remember exactly which one it is, in Harry Potter, where I want to say it's the first part of the last movie, where like Harry and Hermione, they've been camping forever, everything is just miserable, there's no hope, and then they end up they dance, and you're just like, that was such a beautiful little moment, and then it just goes back to being awful again. And you get that roller coaster, you get that during The Last of Us 2. It's just these like, you'll get this scene that you're just like, it takes you back for a second, and you forget like, okay, maybe there is some good still out there, and then it's right back in to just these awful moments. Yeah, I really want to play it now.
You should. It's very worth it.
I should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of getting down to it. Any final comments or anything about The Last of Us 2?
Yeah, there were a couple like favorite parts I guess I wanted to talk about. One of my favorite scenes or my favorite lines in the game, and this is another bonus of having like a dual narrative and having to play both sides, is you hear this line twice, and the first time it doesn't ring as true because you're still in Ellie's head and you're still with Ellie's motivations. And that's when you get back to the theater and Abby's there and she kills Jesse really quick. Boom, he's gone. And she's pointing the gun at Ellie, and she's got Tommy on the ground who she's threatening to kill. And she says to Ellie, she's like, "You killed all my friends. We let you live and you wasted it." And I could never do the line justice because Laura Bailey, who plays Abby, delivers it like just incredibly. Her acting is incredible. And then it wasn't until I played as Abby and I had to see all my friends die, and she says it again, and I teared up because I was like, fuck, like, she's right. She saved Ellie's life. She could have killed Ellie and she could have killed Tommy after Joel, but she let them go. You know, and I've gone back and watched that cutscene because someone pointed it out, and after Ellie she does the killing blow to Joel, you can see in her face, and that's another thing of how insane the motion capture is in this, and how well the performances are captured. But you see in Abby's face that it doesn't like quench her thirst. She's not satisfied. She's still filled with hate, and she's still empty. She's just like done with it. You know, she finally got to Joel, but it didn't do anything for her. It's over, and she's just gonna leave. But she lets Ellie and Tommy go, and she spares their lives. And they waste it multiple times. They fuck it up big time. So that was one of my favorite parts of the game, and the performances all around are just next level. They really make you feel for these characters and make you connect with them. And one other thing I wanted to touch on, one of my favorite, it's kind of like a two-parter favorite parts of the game as far as gameplay goes is, and really the first moment that I really started to warm up to Abby, is you're with Lev and you're going to go, Yara's had her like elbow smashed with a hammer, so her bone is shattered, right? And you have to amputate her arm or else it'll go gangrenous. So you and Lev have to go get medical supplies, and to do that, to not encounter the WLF and the scars, you're going to take this Sephirite secret passage, essentially, which is at the top of a skyscraper, and they build all these like makeshift wooden bridges that go between and through 40-story high skyscrapers and over beams that are like collapsed hundreds of feet above the ground. And not only is Abby going hugely out of her way to help this person who's suffering, that is Lev's sister, but it really humanizes her because you find out that Abby's afraid of heights. And she's up way high in these buildings and like scaling these beams. And Lev's like, come on, like, what's your problem? And you see Abby, like, you see the character model like shivering and like grabbing herself because she's fucking terrified. And they do a great job really showing that to the player because, like, man, I got a lot of vertigo being up there too. And I fell off a couple times, killed Abby.
Oh no.
So that part was really awesome. And then once you get to the building you need to go through, you have to go all the way back down, and you're way up top. And this building's just been like totally gutted and destroyed.
Yeah.
So you're jumping down several floors at a time. All the lights are out. Things are on fire. There's infected everywhere in the building. So you're not only sneaking through. It's not only dark. There's not only fire. There's zombies that want to kill you. But on top of that, Abby is scared of heights, and there's huge distances between where you are and where you have to go. You have to scale beams to get from one side of the floor to the other. And when you look below you, like 5 more floors are blown out underneath you. It was just this incredible set piece. And it was definitely one of the highlights of the game for me as far as gameplay went.
And as someone who is afraid of heights, it really endears you to those characters. Like, it doesn't matter how much you hate this person, when you find out that they also don't like pineapple on their pizza or some little small thing like that, you can't stay mad at somebody
Just
the more you get to know them.
Just to see her scared. You know, just to see her scared. And then there's also when they're back at the aquarium with Owen and Mel obviously doesn't like Abby because she's not stupid. She's a doctor. She knows that Owen and Abby are still in love, obviously. And they're going to leave and go to California. And obviously Mel doesn't want Abby to go. So they have a confrontation. And Mel essentially tells Abby that she's a piece of shit. And like, you've always been one. And like, you are not coming. And just kind of like leaves her there with her hand in her face. And like it shakes Abby and she's crying to herself. And like Yara comes up and she has to kind of like, gather herself quickly. And that's really humanizing too. It really makes you feel for Abby. You know, that she's not.
I remember that scene. It was, I was watching this all on my TV. And I was sitting there and I was about to get up and like go make food. And I stood up and I was like, I had my dishes in my hand and I was just standing there in the middle of the living room watching this scene play out and watching Abby just get reamed out by Mel.
Yeah.
And was just like, oh, I just want to hug this person.
Yeah, you feel
Like,
so bad for her.
I can't watch this. And then it ended up moving on after that scene, and I was still standing there, just in the middle of my living room, like an idiot, just staring at the TV. And it was like, whew, shit, I need to go take a walk. Like, that was really intense. And it's very rare that you get that in video games. And I think, like you said earlier, the cast was amazing. And all of the motion capture and all that stuff really made it. Like, I don't think this game could have been as successful as it was if we didn't have the technology that we had right now. Like, trying to tell this with, like, Mass Effect Andromeda characters would not have gone over as well, because you wouldn't get to see that emotion. You wouldn't feel as real as they did. Like, this looked and felt like you were watching real people going through real situations, and it was very impactful.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, it's I think I can say it's probably my favorite game of the PS4 generation.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, no game has made me feel like that I've played.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, God of War is close behind it for different reasons, entirely different reasons. But this one takes the cake for sure.
Would you say this is a game that everybody should play?
Nope. And I think that's why it's so divisive. You can see a lot of like vitriol and hate and bullshit on the internet from people that haven't played the game, from people that have a lot of problems with gay people or trans people or things like that, from people that they have preconceptions because of things they've seen that are just floating around out there. So, and I just that aside, because I feel like that's a whole other thing. You know, there's a lot of hate surrounding this game, and I don't want to say everyone who doesn't like the game is one of those people.
Yeah.
Not at all. But yeah, I don't think it's for everybody because it requires a lot of you emotionally, and I think if you're not willing to really think about the game, you can miss the point. Yep.
Yeah.
If you don't want to buy in and invest, and you go in with preconceived notions, you'll miss the point.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think that's a good point to end on. If I had to give this score, it would be 10 out of 10. I'm trying to think of like negatives or like imperfections. There really wasn't many. There's like
I was gonna ask like if there was anything you would have changed, or if there was anything that like didn't quite meet expectations or like fell short, but
the AI wasn't the best at some points. Like sometimes you have people following you, like Jesse or Dina or Tommy or whatever. Sometimes that was a little clunky. The constant search for resources gets a little old, but it's not the worst. And all of the positives so outweigh those small little nitpicks.
Yeah.
They're just inconsequential. It wouldn't drop my score. You know what I mean? I wouldn't drop it 0.5 or a whole point because of those little things.
And at the end of the day, like, it is still a video game. Like, there are going to be things where you have to pick up resources. You have things like health. You have, like, there are just game mechanics that it's still a game.
Yeah, as far as resources go, it was still, the combat was still great, and it still felt great crafting and getting those resources, and that felt rewarding, and being able to make, like, more bombs or more bullets or more arrows or whatever. That was all great. I love the gameplay. It was a pleasure going around as Ellie and Abby, murdering all of these people.
So murder is fun.
If violence is fun in video games, most of them are.
It is. Yep. All right. Do you want to sign us off?
Yeah, just thanks for watching, everybody. I know there may be some people in chat that watched. I think I saw Saturnight. Hi, Saturnight. This is live on Twitch. Check us out on Twitch at Antimatter Games with the Z. You can find us on YouTube at the same name. We have a weekly podcast. You can check that out. It's actually bi-weekly now. And we stream every Monday, Friday, Saturday, and sometimes during the week. And yeah, thanks for watching. Play The Last of Us Part 2.
Bye.